New research suggests that Mars might have all the necessary conditions for the appearance of life. Does it mean aliens could be already waiting for us on the red planet? Let's figure it out. On Mars, there are just the right conditions for photosynthesis beneath dusty ice layers in its mid-latitudes. And photosynthesis, the process used by plants, algae, and cyanobacteria to turn light into chemical energy, requires water and sunlight. On Mars, a thick layer of ice might filter out harmful solar radiation while letting enough light through to enable photosynthesis, creating what researchers call radiative habitable zones. This doesn't mean that, at the moment, life exists or has ever existed on Mars. At the same time, the findings give scientists clues about where to search for potential signs of life. Both Earth and Mars lie within the Sun's habitable zone, where temperatures can support liquid water. But while our planet's surface is covered with huge oceans, Mars appears dry and desolate. Yet evidence from NASA missions like Curiosity and Perseverance suggests it wasn't always this way. Ancient lake beds and river channels show that water flowed on Mars billions of years ago. Today, water exists on Mars primarily as ice, often in surprising locations. Scientists believe Mars lost its liquid water when its magnetic field faded, which led to its atmosphere getting stripped away by solar winds. With little atmosphere left to trap heat, water vapor escaped into space, leaving the surface cold and dry. Without an ozone layer, Mars also faces intense ultraviolet radiation, which destroys the complex molecules essential for life. Mars gets about 30% more harmful UV radiation than Earth. But dusty ice layers could shield potential habitats from this radiation while still letting in enough sunlight for photosynthesis. Using computer simulations, researchers found that dust within Martian ice could cause it to melt from below, forming thin layers of liquid water. These pockets could be shielded from evaporation by the overlying ice, creating the two essential ingredients for photosynthesis: water and sunlight. Past studies also suggest that even small amounts of dust, less than 1% in dense Martian snow, can enable melting in mid-latitudes. Observations of exposed dusty ice near Martian gullies also support the idea that these conditions could form shallow liquid water layers under the surface. At the same time, the amount of dust in the ice plays a critical role. Ice with too much dust blocks sunlight, while ice with just the right amount, from 0.01 to 0.1%, can create habitable zones at depths of 2 to 15 inches. Cleaner ice could allow these zones to form deeper, between 7 and 10 feet. As for Mars's polar regions, even though they're rich in ice, they are likely too cold for this melting to occur, making mid-latitudes a more promising target. Interestingly, similar habitats exist on Earth, providing an analog for what might happen on Mars. On Earth, cryoconite holes form when dust and sediment heat ice surfaces, melting them enough to create pockets of liquid water beneath. These translucent ice layers allow sunlight to go through, and researchers have discovered microorganisms living in these shallow subsurface environments. While they go dormant in winter, when sunlight returns in the summer, it reactivates these tiny ecosystems. While this research doesn't confirm the existence of life on Mars per se, it does open up new avenues for exploration. Understanding how dusty ice interacts with sunlight and melts could help identify potential habitable zones on the red planet. The research team is planning to refine their simulations to better pinpoint where and when melting might occur on Mars. They're also recreating these conditions in the lab to study them in greater detail. This work could provide important insights for future missions looking for signs of life on Mars.
Mars is the Earth's space cousin. It's the fourth planet in our solar system, about half the size of the Earth. It also has two small moon buddies, Phobos and Deimos. These moons are shaped like potatoes. Phobos is the drama king, moving closer to Mars and planning a crash landing in about 50 million years. Deimos is much calmer though, hanging out farther away from Mars. Mars got a cool nickname, the Red Planet, thanks to its rusty red surface. This color was so bright that it was spotted by astronomers many years ago. Even you can sometimes see it in the sky with the naked eye, a small scarlet dot. And maybe it has hot vibes, but in reality, Mars is a very cold desert. The temperatures there can drop as low as minus 240 degrees Fahrenheit. But was Mars always nothing more than a rusty-looking desert? Actually, no. Scientists believe that perhaps many years ago, this planet was similar to ours. Meet Curiosity, the detective rover made by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Scientists want to know all about the Martian weather, landscape, and other stuff like that. Curiosity is a pretty heavy car-sized robot. It weighs about 1,985 pounds. It embarked on its journey on November 26, 2011. The rover pulled off a landing on Mars on August 6, 2012. Originally, Curiosity's mission was supposed to last for 2 years, but it's still going strong. Curiosity is basically a space lab on wheels. It's packed with cameras, spectrometers, radiation detectors, and sensors to sniff out the Martian environment. As Curiosity roams around, it rewinds Mars history. And during its mission, the rover discovered something incredible: signs of lakes and rivers from long ago. You see, Curiosity's favorite spot to play around is Gail Crater. It's a prehistoric Martian oasis where water might have hung out. There's this huge mountain in the middle called Mount Sharp. This place is taller than 10 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other. And it's got layers of rocks that hold Mars's ancient secrets. Recently, scientists spotted something great when studying Curiosity's data: mud tracks. What's so surprising about that? Well, these aren't just any old tracks. They're like messages from the past. They mean that the Martian ground used to get wet and then dry out again. The mud on the ground would shrink and crack during the drying phases, making these T-shaped junctions. Moreover, it seems like the ground on Mars went through several wet-dry cycles. It happened maybe up to 10 times. This made the junctions turn into Y-shaped cracks. When a bunch of Y-shaped cracks got together, they made a super cool pattern, something like a patchwork of hexagons. It looks just like honeycombs, or even a dragon's skin. Each of these hexagons are the size of candy. Similar cycles have happened on Earth, and they're linked to the birth of life. When water dries up, it leaves behind concentrated stuff that's great for chemical reactions, and these reactions might be the same ones that kickstart life. These hexagons have been hanging around for a really, really long time, billions of years. That means that Mars once had a climate kind of like Earth's, and maybe even life. In fact, the red planet even has some signs of water right now, in the form of hidden ice at the poles. Mars has the North and South poles, and just like with the Earth, they're red planet's ice caps. Picture the North Cap as a big, icy pancake about 620 miles wide. The South Cap is a bit smaller, about 220 miles wide, but it's got a thicker ice layer, almost like a snowball with a strong shell. When it's winter at the poles, it's an incredibly long nighttime. No sunlight, just chilly darkness. During that time, around 30% of the air turns into frozen CO2. It's dry ice, the same stuff that's often used in horror movies. But when the poles wake up to sunlight, the dry ice turns back into gas. All this freezing and thawing makes clouds and frost, just like on Earth. One time, a rover named Opportunity even caught some clouds made of water ice. But it doesn't necessarily mean Mars was once thriving just like the Earth. Life needs more than just wet, dry cycles to pop up. It needs the right atmosphere and other special ingredients. We're not sure if Mars had all of those, and even if it did, there's no guarantee that life actually happened. But this raises another very important question. Has Mars ever hosted tiny living creatures? Curiosity isn't the only robot that tries to find the answer to that. There's also a rover called Perseverance. It's trying to find clues about Martian life. It's digging into an old Martian crater once filled with water. And like a space archaeologist, Perseverance is searching for fossilized signs of ancient critters. And here's the funny thing. Some scientists think that we've stumbled upon it almost half a century ago. The only problem is, we might have accidentally destroyed it. It happened even before Curiosity started rolling around Mars. Back in the 1980s, two cool NASA's landers, Viking 1 and Viking 2, made a pit stop on the red planet. These landers took a selfie, and then they also did some funky experiments on the Martian soil, all in the name of finding signs of life. What they found is some weird organic stuff called perchlorate. It's a compound that we use in fireworks or rocket fuel. But most results didn't seem that promising. They even mixed up some soil with water and nutrients, hoping that if there were Martian microbes, they'd snack on the goodies and return radioactive gas as a result. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. Now, here's the problem. Some scientists think that maybe the water they added back then actually destroyed those tiny Martian critters. Poor microbes were just hanging out and suddenly got soaked by a bunch of weird liquid. Something like this wouldn't be very pleasant for the Earth microbes. They live inside rocks and they're sucking water from the air. Pouring water on them would result in a total disaster. So, of course, giving them nutrients after that wouldn't do anything. If you've just barely survived a water bath, you're probably not in the mood for a feast. Perhaps these Martian buddies might have something called hydrogen peroxide in their cells. It helps them live in an extreme environment. If that's true, it could explain all the results from the experiments. You see, the instruments heated up the samples, so if there was hydrogen peroxide, it would have gone boom, wiping off the little guys and turning their cozy homes instantly. Imagine how ridiculous it would be if it turns out that we accidentally destroyed the only signs of life on Mars. Ideally, we need a new mission to Mars to test this theory. Let's hope it's not true. In any case, the journey isn't over. There are more missions planned for Mars, and humans might even visit this planet someday. The next mission is the Mars Sample Return. It's a super cool teamwork project between NASA and ESA. They're teaming up to bring back souvenirs from Mars, collected by NASA's trusty Mars Perseverance rover. There's going to be a whole bunch of spaceships. They'll work together to bring these precious Mars samples back. The samples are planned to arrive on Earth in the early to mid-2030s. And the fun doesn't stop at Mars. Our Mars missions are a warm-up for an even bigger adventure, exploring icy moons around Saturn and Jupiter. These moons have hidden oceans beneath their icy surfaces, and who knows what kinds of space secrets they're hiding. But whether it's Mars, icy moons, or beyond, our quest to find extraterrestrial life continues. In addition, we are slowly starting to find more and more organic materials on Mars, and maybe one day we'll finally find some microbes in our solar system. Let's hope for it and stay tuned.
The year 2022 was rich in amazing discoveries. Let's have a look at the most impressive of them. The newest of NASA's rovers, Perseverance, keeps exploring the surface of the red planet. Right now, it's hunting for signs of ancient life in the Jezero crater. That's a 28-mile-wide impact crater. It was likely once filled with water. While trekking across the crater's floor, the rover spotted several surprising things. One of them was a weird purple coating on a few rocks. It was strangely similar to rock varnish formed by microbes on our planet. Scientists haven't figured out what it is yet. The rover has also been very successful in adding new samples to its rock collection. It's got 14 pieces of rock. They'll be stored on the surface of Mars for future missions to collect. NASA and the European Space Agency have been developing different plans for getting hold of these samples. Most of them involve a few spacecraft and even several helicopters. How about something more down to Earth? In June, a giant freshwater stingray was discovered in the Mekong River in Cambodia. A fisherman called Mao Tong accidentally snagged it while fishing. He called researchers, claiming the stingray was way larger than anything he had ever seen. The scientists arrived and found out that the creature measured 13 feet from snout to tail. It also weighed a staggering 660 pounds. This made it the largest freshwater fish that had ever been recorded. It was even certified by the Guinness World Records. Another animal-related discovery: scientists have found evidence that spiders might see dreams. One scientist studying these creatures noticed that when snoozing, little arachnids jerked while dangling from a thread with their legs curled. It resembled the way cats and dogs twitch while dreaming. The researchers set up a whole lab to observe spiders. The resulting study revealed that jumping spiders indeed experienced a sleep-like state that included the rapid eye movement stage. And with 8 eyes, that's a lot of twitching. Researchers identified the remains of a 17th century Spanish galleon. It was found near Oregon's north coast. Experts think that those are the remains of Santo Cristo de Burgos. In 1693, this vessel was traveling from the Philippines to Mexico, but at one point it veered off its course and disappeared. The lost galleon was known as the beeswax wreck. It got such a name because it was carrying blocks of beeswax. People had known about the ship for a long time, since parts of its cargo were often washed up on shore. But until recently, no one knew the name of the ship. But then researchers analyzed timbers discovered in a cave near Astoria. The analysis revealed that those were made from hardwood used to build ships in Asia in the 17th century, which meant the mysterious vessel was the perfect match for Santo Cristo de Burgos. Now, early in 2022, scientists noticed something alarming in West Antarctica. They already knew that the wedge of the continent sitting south of Argentina might raise the sea level by 10 feet. The thing is, our world is changing, and some of that ice is going to melt one day. But that's not the worst news. Experts spotted ominous hints that a massive collapse could occur really soon. A large ice shelf cracked suddenly. This ice shelf stops the ice sheet from slipping into the ocean and melting away. If this rupture widens, it might kick off a catastrophic chain reaction. Elsewhere, it was January when a submarine volcano, known as Hunga Tonga Hunga Hahapai in the Kingdom of Tonga, erupted. The event was unlike any other witnessed in recent decades. The blast was so powerful that it sent a pressure wave all over the globe, and it traveled around the world not once, but several times. It also produced giant tsunami waves. Scientists claim that everything about the eruption was extremely weird. For example, how insanely powerful it was, or the cascade of effects that followed. The eruption excavated more than 2 cubic miles of rock from the seafloor, becoming the largest volcanic blast in the past 100 years. It also unleashed tons of volcanic rubble and hot ash that moved along the seafloor for a whopping 50 miles. Also in January, scientists discovered a site in southeastern Australia with rocks that contained a breathtaking record of life. The fossils found at McGrath's Flat are estimated to be from 11 to 16 million years old. Those are soft-bodied small creatures, including spiders, and they're preserved in such extraordinary detail that you can even see the spider's leg hairs. The researchers also managed to spot tiny pores in fossilized leaves. Those pores used to take in carbon dioxide. Scientists discovered several new snail species while searching for animals in Southeast Asia, and they believe that 2 of these species are the smallest of all seen before. One of them lies in Vietnamese caves and is a mere 0.02 inches in length, which means if you decided to put them on a U.S. quarter, many hundreds would fit there. Now, I bet you heard of NASA's James Webb Telescope. It's a giant infrared instrument, and it's floating in space millions of miles away from our planet. It spent the first part of 2022 preparing to take its first images, and in July, the world finally saw those pictures. The images of the cosmos taken by the telescope are incredibly detailed. In fact, one picture was even called the deepest view of the universe ever. Among other pictures, there is a now iconic image of the Carina Nebula. Another one is a stunning view of Neptune's rings. At the moment, the telescope has a long list of observations it has to do. It's supposed to explore everything, from distant exoplanets to the oldest galaxies out there. Now, you probably know that 65 million years ago, give or take, life on planet Earth changed forever after a 6.5-mile-wide asteroid crashed into our planet. This catastrophic event caused a mass extinction, which, in turn, led to 3/4 of all species, including dinos, disappearing from the face of the Earth. In February, scientists got exciting new information about the disaster. They studied some fish fossils and concluded that the asteroid had hit Earth during spring in the northern hemisphere. Another discovery was made in March. It turns out that right after the impact, rocks started to rain down more than 1,000 miles away from the impact site. And in August, scientists found something that could be a fragment of the asteroid off the coast of West Africa. It probably broke off and slammed into Earth separately, leaving an undersea crater. Now, brace yourself. Earlier this year, scientists grew brain cells in a lab and taught them to play video games. Yeah, I know, that's wild. Researchers from Australia claim they created the so-called mini-brains that could sense and respond to their environment. Each brain consisted of 800,000 cells. When viewing video games, they produced electrical activity. And even though they often missed the ball in a particular game, the connection rate was higher than a totally random chance. A research team funded by the National Geographic Society discovered a curious fossil in August 2022. It belongs to the oldest dinosaur found in Africa, this guy, whose name I can't pronounce. This ancient creature lived about 230 million years ago. It was one of the earliest ancestors of sauropods that we know about. This group includes such long-necked giants as the Brontosaurus. But unlike them, the dino we're talking about wasn't a giant. Scientists think it was probably a mere 2 feet tall at the hip. And some more great news. We now know for sure how to nudge asteroids off track. NASA made a spaceship known as DART crash into an asteroid. The main goal of this experiment was to check whether such a collision could change the course of the asteroid, knocking it off its orbit. This method could help us avoid a potentially catastrophic asteroid strike. The spacecraft, which cost $325 million and was the size of a vending machine, slammed into asteroid Dimorphos at a speed of 14,000 miles per hour. The spaceship burst into pieces right away. But the mission still seemed to be a success since Dimorphos was indeed affected by the collision to a measurable degree. So, maybe we won't need Bruce Willis and his gang after all. We've been dreaming about life on Mars for a long time. Not only about growing potatoes there in the future, but also about all the potatoes that could have been there in the past. Has there ever been life on Mars? Recently, scientists have found something that could be evidence of that. Let's find out what happened. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun. A human hasn't set foot on Mars yet, but robots have set their wheels. The first spacecraft that visited the Red Planet were NASA Viking landers. They flew there back in 1976 and sent us a lot of interesting data. Back then, we didn't know anything about Mars. To us, it looked like a cold, lifeless desert. But since we're so similar, scientists began to wonder, has it always been like this? Or is it possible that once Mars used to be thriving and full of life? And in 2022, NASA's Mars rover Perseverance found something that could shed a light on this mystery. But first of all, what is Perseverance? Scientists have suggested that if there was life on Mars once, it's unlikely that it could simply disappear without a trace. It must have left some traces, perhaps underground, where they would be protected from radioactive solar tantrums and other nastiness. So we need to check the rocks. It's important to note that we aren't looking for life on Mars right now. There most likely isn't any. Instead, we want to look into the distant past of our twin planet. We're talking billions of years ago, when Mars could have been warm, green, and far from lifeless. In other words, we have to find dead microbes and various chemical compounds similar to ones on the Earth. This is the mission of our main character, Perseverance. It arrived on Mars in February of 2021. The spacecraft landed on the bottom of the 30-mile-wide Jezero crater, and after landing, it scooted over to the west, to the place that prompted scientists to choose Jezero for research. This place is a dried-up river delta, and this former river is already more than 3.5 billion years old. The Jezero crater itself was once a large lake. Yup, apparently there was life on Mars, and scientists have suggested that these places would be perfect as bodyguards of microbes. That's exactly what bacteria do on Earth. They hide, being still in the depths of lakes and ponds, so we could probably find traces there. The researchers believe that this particular lake has the highest scientific value in the entire mission. The highest chance to find rocks on which such bacteria could survive is here in Jezero. So Perseverance went to the delta. The row wasn't easy though. The rover missed a little and landed further than planned. As one famous movie said, "This little maneuver's going to cost us 51 years." Fortunately, Perseverance took only 1 year, and on the way, it was able to explore Jezero a little. The rover uses a complex built-in tool to explore the world. The tool is called Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals, or just Sherlock. Boy, NASA sure loves its acronyms. As the device approached the delta, the signal of organic molecules became stronger. Soon, these signals were everywhere, and besides, they were the brightest that the scientists have ever seen. What does it mean? Elementary, my dear Watson. You know, Sherlock. It's time to dig. Since July 2021, Perseverance has drilled and collected 4 thin cores of sedimentary rock. The total number of collected rocks at the moment is 12. This is the first time in history that we're collecting something like this on another planet. These 4 cores were found on 2 rocks called Skinner Ridge and Wildcat Ridge. The first pair of cores, the ones from the Skinner Ridge, don't seem very interesting at first glance. They're quite close to what we can find in many places on Earth. However, if we look at them closer, we'll see that they're dotted with round grains of some dark material. These dark grains could have once been deposited on them by an ancient river, the same one that flowed into Jezero. It's possible that the river brought them from places hundreds of miles away from Jezero, and that's pretty cool. If we study these cores, we'll be able to learn even more about the far corners of Mars. Well, there are no corners on it, but you get the idea. Then, in April 2022, Perseverance did arrive at the delta, and then scientists finally found what they were looking for. The discovery, to put it mildly, excited them. They found 2 more cores, which held organic substances. This pair was taken from the Wildcat Ridge. It's found very close to the Skinner Ridge, but the 2 rocks are quite different from each other. These samples are lighter in color and more uniform. Most likely, they're mudstone, an unusual rock similar to clay, but harder and unable to absorb water. They're also finer grain than the cores of the Skinner Ridge. Why does it matter? Because the finer the grains in the stone, the more likely it is that there may be some traces of a past life in it. On Earth, fine-grained stones most often lie on the bottoms of ponds and in similar places. There, they can preserve the remains of dead organisms and similar stuff for years. And this is exactly what we found on them. Additionally, according to scientists, there was more organic matter in these 2 cores than in any other place studied by Perseverance so far. It probably accumulated there while the lake was gradually evaporating billions of years ago. So, there really was life on Mars? Well, let's slow down a little. Organic substances are molecules holding carbon. And yes, on Earth, they're most often associated with life, but not always. Sometimes they can form as a result of other things. Therefore, we cannot say for sure whether there was life on Mars. We don't know if these molecules really remain from some Martian microbes, or if they're the result of some other things. But the discovery is still very significant. We have to literally keep digging this way. To learn more about this organic matter, scientists need to collect a couple more samples of fine-grained rock. It would also be great to study the material lying around these former reservoirs. Perseverance has already moved to another area, to a place with a beautiful name, Enchanted Lake. Now it needs to look for similar things there. It will also continue to study Lake Jezero. Eventually, Perseverance will climb to the top of the delta and then continue exploring ancient sites outside the crater. Sometime before the end of 2022, Perseverance will probably have 6 or more samples of the Martian cores. Unfortunately, its tools, though complex, are quite limited. This data alone won't be enough for us to get a complete picture. Therefore, NASA plans to send other spacecraft to Jezero in the coming years. Together with the European Space Agency, they're working on the next robotic mission, known as the Mars Sample Return. The name speaks for itself. These devices will arrive and take away all the test tubes from the old Prospector Perseverance. After that, these samples will be delivered to Earth, though not by Amazon Prime, and then scientists will be able to analyze them in advanced laboratories. However, all this will take a really long time. The launch of this mission is scheduled for 2027-2028, and the spacecrafts won't be able to return until 2033. But if everything goes well, it will be the first samples in history delivered to Earth from Mars. In other words, there's still enough space for research, literally. And yes, we don't yet know the true meaning of these finds. But that's why the entire mission was created, right? And who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll finally find out the truth about what happened on Mars billions of years ago. Ooh, check out the Martian! Made you look. Look.
The soil beneath your feet is red and dry. The place is freezing cold. Rusty-colored dust is floating in the air. You make one step, then another. It's hard to move because of the thick layer of dust your feet are sinking into. You're on Mars, and you've come here after hearing some absolutely incredible news. These days, the so-called red planet indeed looks dry and dusty. But scientists think that this world might have been very different a long, long time ago. They have found some evidence of a huge ocean that could have existed on the surface of Mars about 3.5 billion years ago. And this ocean probably covered hundreds of thousands of square miles. It all started with numerous satellite images of the surface of the red planet. They were snapped at different angles. As a result, researchers managed to construct a relief map of the area. They charted out more than 4,000 miles of specific formations that had most likely been carved by rivers. Those formations could also be channels, once carved out on the sea floor. Scientists used the data gathered by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2007. They analyzed the thickness of the ridges and their angles and locations. Their main goal was to explore the topographical depression called Aeolus Dorsa. It turned out that all those years ago, this part of the red planet had been undergoing a series of constant changes. They could have been caused by the rapid movement of rocks, pulled around by currents and rivers, as well as noticeable increases in sea level. Researchers also noticed a pretty clear boundary that separated the southern highlands of Mars, elevated and highly cratered, from the smooth lowlands of the planet. It looked very similar to a shoreline left by a ginormous ocean. This all likely means that in ancient times, there indeed was an ocean on the surface of Mars, and a large one at that. What's even more exciting is that the existence of such an ocean might mean the existence of life. This discovery can tell scientists a lot about the ancient climate on the red planet, as well as its evolution. We now know there had to be a period on Mars when the planet was quite warm, and its atmosphere was thick enough to keep so much liquid water. What's even more incredible, the climate in the northern hemisphere of Mars 3 billion years ago could have resembled the one we have on Earth nowadays. But then, where is this ocean now? What happened to it? Perhaps the climate of the red planet was becoming cooler, and the surface of the ocean froze. There's a theory claiming that these days, the ocean remains in its frozen state, deep under a layer of rock, debris, and dust under a northern plain called Vasticus Borealis. Or the ocean's waters could have been lost to the atmosphere, and eventually space through the process of atmospheric sputtering. During this process, atoms get knocked away from the atmosphere after colliding with high-energy particles coming from the sun. Anyway, the theory of an ocean that once covered a substantial part of Mars's northern hemisphere hasn't been confirmed yet. Scientists are still arguing about its existence. As for now, Mars is a very cold world with an average temperature of -80 degrees Fahrenheit. The planet's surface is rocky. It's covered with dry lake beds, craters, volcanoes, and canyons. The ocean that might have existed on Mars isn't the only awesome thing about this planet. Let's speak about those sandstorms raging on the red planet. In movies, they're depicted as incredibly powerful forces of nature, destroying astronauts' camps and tearing their spaceships into pieces. But how much of it is true? Mars is indeed infamous for producing dust storms so massive they can be seen by telescopes on Earth. They sometimes cover continent-sized areas and can last for weeks at a time. But besides them, there are much rarer storms that occur once in 3 Mars years, which is about 5.5 Earth years. Such storms are larger and much more intense than regular ones. They encircle the entire planet. That's why scientists call them global dust storms. At the same time, it's unlikely that even a global dust storm could cause serious harm to astronauts or their equipment. Even though Martian storms are massive, the wind speed reaches 60 miles per hour tops. That's less than half the speed of most hurricane-force winds on Earth. Plus, this comparison of wind speeds can be kind of misleading. The atmosphere on Mars is just 1% or so as dense as the atmosphere on our planet. It means that the wind there needs to blow much faster to cause any damage, or even fly a kite. Now let's move to the next amazing phenomenon spotted on the red planet. When you look at it from a distance, it looks like an eye. There are even some winding channels that look like veins running through the eyeball. But the closer you get, the less the formation looks like an actual eye. It's actually a giant crater, almost 19 miles in diameter. Around the crater, which looks as if it has a pupil, there are other, even bigger craters. They likely formed billions of years ago. That's when Mars had to withstand multiple attacks of space rocks. But why is the eye crater darker than the surrounding landscape? Scientists think that once, water filled the ginormous pit. Remember those channels? They were likely carrying that water. And since the crater was filled with water, it stopped some substances and minerals from eroding away. Your next destination is Vallis Marineris. That's an enormous canyon, or rather, a canyon system, that runs along Mars's equator. It stretches for more than 2,500 miles. It's also 4 times as deep as the famous Grand Canyon on Earth. The thing is so huge, it could span the entire continental United States, from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. Most scientists think that Vallis Marineris is a huge tectonic crack in the crust of the red planet. It could have formed when the planet was cooling down in the distant past. Another breathtaking sight on Mars is the largest shield volcano in the entire solar system, Olympus Mons. It's more than 370 miles in diameter, which means it's almost the same size as the state of Arizona. The mountain is also 16 miles high and rimmed by incredibly tall cliffs. To imagine the sheer size of the volcano, let's make some comparisons. The largest volcano on Earth is Mauna Loa, around 2.6 miles high and 75 miles across, which actually sounds pretty impressive. But the volume of Olympus Mons is around 100 times larger than that of Mauna Loa. The Martian giant could swallow the whole chain of Hawaiian Islands, from Kauai to Hawaii. Scientists have been wondering for quite some time why this volcano is so large. It might be the result of lower surface gravity and higher eruption rates. Or the reason may be the red planet's crust, which is very different from Earth's. On our planet, the crust is made up of 15 to 20 moving tectonic plates. As plates move over hotspots that produce lava, new volcanoes form, and the already existing ones become extinct. That's why lava can get to the surface through many vents. But on Mars, the crust isn't broken into the same tectonic plates as on Earth, and the lava has nothing to do but pile in one very, very large volcano. Now, if you visited Mars and decided to go on an evening stroll, you'd witness a strange phenomenon. It occurs on the red planet after sunset. when temperatures fall below -80 degrees Fahrenheit. A bizarre, mysterious glow spreads across the Martian sky. Unfortunately, without special equipment, you wouldn't be able to observe this soft glow. Visible only in ultraviolet light, this night glow is the result of chemical reactions that occur dozens of miles above the surface of the red planet.
On the 30th of May, 2024, scientists made a shocking discovery. A rock that cracked open after NASA's Curiosity Mars rover drove over it revealed yellow sulfur crystals. It was something never seen on the red planet before. Starting from October 2023, Curiosity has been exploring an area rich in sulfates. That's a kind of salt that forms when water evaporates and contains sulfur. But in the past, all discovered rocks only had mixes of sulfur and other materials, while the rock found by the rover is made of pure sulfur. Now, most people associate sulfur with that yucky stench of rotten eggs, but in reality, elemental sulfur doesn't have any smell. It forms pretty rarely and needs very particular conditions. And scientists have never associated such conditions with that very location on the red planet. Now, guess what? Curiosity then found an entire field of bright rocks similar to the one it had crashed, made of pure sulfur. Specialists explain that it's something that shouldn't be there. So now, they have to find a way to explain this phenomenon. It's just one of a few interesting findings Curiosity has made during its exploration of the Gediz Vallis channel. That's a groove running down a slope of 3-mile-tall Mount Sharp. The rover has been ascending the base of this mountain since 2014. Each layer of the mountain represents a certain period of the history of the red planet. And the main mission of Curiosity is to figure out when and where ancient Martian terrain could have provided nutrients for microbial life. Gediz Vallis had been spotted from space years before Curiosity was launched. This channel became one of the main reasons scientists wanted to visit this part of Mars. They believe that the channel might have been carved by flows of liquid water and debris. They supposedly left a ridge of boulders and sediment going 2 miles down the mountslide below the channel. Since Curiosity arrived at the channel earlier this year, researchers have been trying to figure out whether landslides or ancient floodwaters built up the large piles of debris rising from the channel's floor. The latest data from Curiosity hints that both factors played their own roles in this process. Some mounds look as if they were left by wild flows of water and debris, and others seem to result from local landslides. The thing is, stones carried by water flows got rounded like river rocks, and angular rocks are likely to have been deposited by dry avalanches. One more detail: water soaked all the material that settled in that area, and the resulting chemical reactions bleached white halo shapes into some rocks. Over time, wind and sand erosion revealed those shapes. Researchers say that the period when it was all happening wasn't a quiet one for Mars. There was an astonishing amount of activity there. Multiple flows down the channel included severe floods and boulder-rich flows. All this evidence of water tells a more complex story than what scientists expected to find in that region. That's why they've been so eager to lay their hands on a rock sample from the channel. It would let them learn more about the history of that area. Well, on the 18th of June, they got their chance. The sulfur rocks were tiny and brittle, so they couldn't be sampled using the drill. But nearby, Curiosity found a large rock that was later nicknamed Mammoth Lakes. Rover engineers had to look for a part of the rock that could allow safe drilling. Luckily, there was a suitable parking spot on the loose, sloping surface of the rock. Curiosity bored its 41st hole with the help of a powerful drill. Then, the rover trickled the powderized rock into its belly for further analysis. This way, scientists will be able to figure out what material the rock was made of. Curiosity has already moved away from Mammoth Lakes. Now, the rover is off to search for other surprises the channel has prepared for us Earthlings.
A giant volcano has been found near Mars's equator. It was literally hiding in plain sight. It's deeply eroded but active from ancient to recent times. There might even be remnants of glacier ice near its base. That's why this discovery might indicate a promising new location to search for life, as well as a potential destination for future human and robotic exploration. The discovery of a giant volcano and a possible sheet of hidden glacier ice was announced at the 55th Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Texas. The volcano is located in the eastern part of Mars' Tharsis Volcanic Province, between Labyrinth of the Night and Valleys of Mariner. The formation was actually repeatedly spotted by spacecraft orbiting Mars, but it's so deeply eroded that it was hard to recognize it for what it really was. The structure is still awaiting its official name. At the moment, it's referred to as the Noctis volcano. It reaches a height of 29,600 feet and spans an impressive 280 miles across. Such a giant size indicates that the volcano has been active for a very long time. In its southeastern part, there's a thin recent volcanic deposit, and beneath, glacier ice might still be present. Scientists were examining the geology of the area where they had spotted the remains of a glacier the year before when they realized they were inside a volcano. Several clues gave away the volcanic origin of the eroded structure. For example, the area of the central summit has a few elevated mesas forming an arc. It reaches the highest point and then slopes downhill from the summit. The outer slopes extend out to 140 miles in different directions. The remains of a collapsed volcanic crater that used to host a lava lake are located near the center of the structure. Lava flows and deposits made of volcanic ash, cinders, pumice, and rock fragments ejected during eruptions, as well as hydrated mineral deposits, appear in several spots within the structure. In addition to the volcano, a large area of volcanic deposits within the volcano's perimeter has been found, too. It covers an area of 1,930 square miles and contains loads of low, rounded, elongated, blister-like mounds. Such terrain is believed to be a field of rootless cones, mounds produced by explosive steam venting or steam swelling. It happens when a thick cover of hot volcanic materials happens to rest on a water or ice-rich surface. The Noctis volcano seems to have a long and complicated history of modifications. They might have occurred because of the combination of fracturing and thermal and glacial erosion. Researchers believe the volcano could be a vast shield made of layers of pyroclastic materials, lava, and ice. The latter might have appeared due to snow and glaciers accumulating on the volcano's flanks through time. Eventually, fractures and faults developed in the region, probably due to the uplift of the Tharsis region on which the volcano sits. Lava started to rise through various parts of the volcano. It led to thermal erosion and the removal of huge amounts of hidden ice. Entire sections of the volcano collapsed. Glaciers continued the erosion process, giving the numerous canyons crisscrossing the structure their peculiar shape. If this version is correct, then possible hidden sheets of glacier ice around the volcano might be the remains of the latest glaciation that impacted the Noctis volcano. And still, a lot about the newly discovered formation remains a mystery. It's obvious that it has been active for a long time and started to grow early in Mars's history, but it's unclear when exactly. Even though it erupted even in modern times, it's unknown if it's still volcanically active. Will it erupt again when people begin to colonize the red planet? And finally, if it has been active for a very long time, is it possible for the combination of constant warmth and water from ice to allow the site to harbor life?
There are tons of weird things on Mars. Spoons, noodles, doors, even faces. Are they all really just rocks? Besides, it's not the only planet in our solar system full of mysterious things. Let's check them out. Recently, we found a strange thing on Mars that looks like a smooth, spoon-like object. It grabbed everyone's attention after NASA's Curiosity rover spotted it. The rock, with a handle and rounded tip, looks like it's floating in the rover's photo. People on the internet are puzzled about what it might be. Some are joking that it's a Martian's bowling pin, or even a shoehorn left by extraterrestrial creatures. But Andrew Good from NASA says it's not that exciting. Turns out it's just a rock shaped by the wind over a long time. These kinds of rocks with odd shapes are common on Mars. They're called ventifacts. Ventifact is a rock that can get scratched, dented, or smoothed out by tiny particles carried by the wind. You'll usually find these kinds of rocks in dry places where there's not much grass or trees to block the wind, and where there's a lot of sand blowing around. Sometimes, the wind can carve ventifacts into really cool shapes, like the mushroom rocks you can see in the White Desert National Park in Egypt. These rocks look like giant mushrooms because the wind wears away the bottom part faster than the top, making them stand tall and slim. Ventifacts aren't the only cool Martian rocks. Check out this series of surreal spikes protruding from the red surface. NASA's Curiosity rover stumbled upon them while exploring the Gail crater on Mars. They quickly caught everyone's attention. Twisting structures resembling spikes looked like some extraterrestrial doors. Even the SETI Institute, an organization focused on searching for extraterrestrial life, tweeted about the image, referring to it as a cool rock. But in reality, these are just hoodoos. These tall and thin spires occur when hard rock sits atop softer rock layers. Martian spikes are likely cemented fillings of ancient fractures in sedimentary rock, with softer material eroded away over time. Again, there are many hoodoos on Earth too. They're also called fairy chimneys or tent rocks. You can find them in places like Utah's Bryce Canyon and the Colorado Plateau. NASA is excited about these weird structures because they can help us learn more about the history of the Gail crater. There was also a rock that looked like a jelly donut. We called this rock Pinnacle Island. It was spotted by NASA's cameras. However, just 4 days earlier, it was nowhere to be seen. So how did it magically disappear? In a very anticlimactic way, it was kicked up by one of Opportunity's wheels as it traversed the Martian terrain. But there's still some mystery surrounding that jelly donut. Analysis revealed that Pinnacle Island contains unusually high levels of sulfur and manganese. Both of these things are water-soluble. In other words, there might have been some water action that created these elements in the rock. So this tiny thing suddenly caused a lot of drama, and an entire lawsuit against NASA. It claimed that the agency failed to investigate a possible fungus growing on Mars. Jelly donut fungus. But not all our findings are natural. Another puzzling discovery was this thing the Perseverance rover spotted. It's something that looks like tangled spaghetti or string. Just like the donut, this mysterious object showed up in a rover camera image and then vanished from the sandy ground in several days. It turns out that it could be debris from the rover's landing system. Perseverance landed in the Jezero crater in February 2021. It had a rough landing and accidentally scattered debris around. Some of these debris pieces have been showing up in the rover's images for a while now. The string-like object is likely a piece of shredded Dacron netting, which is a type of fiber used in thermal blankets. These blankets help regulate equipment temperatures during the super hot process of landing on Mars. It probably underwent significant unraveling and shredding due to strong forces during the landing. Thermal blankets lost a bunch of stuff back then. For example, this shiny foil piece spotted in June. The rover found it on a rock. What's remarkable is how far some of the debris has traveled. The rover landed about 1.2 miles away from where it's currently exploring. It's probably because the crash threw the debris into the air, and the Martian winds carried it over such a distance. Mars is known for its strong winds, which can move lightweight objects. However, while it's fun to stumble upon them on images, there are concerns about the debris and trash on Mars. We haven't even fixed this problem on Earth, and we're already creating it on Mars. The debris we left on the red planet is already accumulating in an area called Hogwallow Flats. Plus, the debris can accidentally contaminate the sample tubes used for collecting Martian rocks. So far, NASA isn't overly worried about this, but they're keeping a close eye on it to prevent any issues with the rovers. Now, how about not things, but animals? Curiosity caused quite a stir when it captured something that looked like a rat on Mars. Some started speculating that it could be evidence of indigenous Martian life, or even that this rodent was brought along by Curiosity. But the Mars rat, once again, turned out to be just a weird rock. It looked interesting because of the natural processes like wind erosion and mechanical abrasion. We also found some worm-looking things. Curiosity snapped a picture of a formation that looks like worms wriggling across the Martian landscape. Despite its tiny size, this formation stands out with its unique shape and rough texture. It's probably made of durable material resistant to Mars's harsh erosion. And finally, our top mysterious finding is the face on Mars. Cydonia is a region on Mars that has captured both scientific and popular interest. It's located in Mars's northern hemisphere. It lies between heavily cratered regions to the south and relatively smooth plains to the north. There's a theory that the northern plains may have once been ocean beds. Maybe Cydonia was once a coastal zone. This place is full of interesting and beautiful features that tell us a lot about the history of the Red Planet. But its most interesting feature was the Martian face. This thing gained widespread attention when it was snapped by the Viking 1 orbiter in 1976. Some believed that it was evidence of a long-lost Martian civilization. At first, NASA dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow. But after some analysis, it turned out to be, yep, another rock. We also saw a face of a bear. It was captured by the high-resolution imaging experiment camera. In an image, we can see a circular fracture pattern that looks like a bear's head, with two craters forming the eyes and a V-shaped collapse structure like the nose. The head likely formed because something heavy settled on top of an old hole in the ground. This hole was filled with either lava or mud. The nose-like feature is speculated to be a volcanic or mud vent. But why do we keep seeing these strange things on Mars? Sometimes our brains can trick us into seeing things like faces or objects in rocks and other things. But these are just illusions called pareidolia. Pareidolia is a psychological phenomenon that makes us see familiar patterns or shapes, especially faces, where none actually exist. It's because the brain encounters something it doesn't recognize or understand right away. It tries to find things that look the most like this one. So it sees random patterns, textures, or sounds as something meaningful and recognizable. That's why a chair and clothes on it seems like a super creepy human-like figure at night. It also causes you to see faces or shapes in clouds, or hear recognizable sounds and even words in random noise. It's a fascinating proof of the power of our perception, but we also should be careful with it and not let our imagination run wild.
You must have heard that humans were supposed to fly to Mars within the next 10 to 20 years, but now the mission seems to be at risk. A new study has revealed the dramatic effects that such a journey can have on the human body, and because of that, the entire plan is now at risk. Samples from over 40 missions, which involve both mice and humans, have shown that the conditions in space are likely to have an even more negative influence on our bodies than we thought. Both NASA and SpaceX are planning to send crewed missions to Mars in the coming decades, but new findings might put an end to these projects. Researchers at University College London have discovered that microgravity and galactic radiation in space cause serious health risks, and they become more and more pressing the longer someone is exposed to these conditions. Surprisingly, the body part at the highest risk is the kidneys. The research has shown that after less than a month in space, some parts of the kidneys show visible signs of shrinking. So before we go all the way to Mars, we'll need to develop measures to protect the kidneys and other parts of the body. This will allow astronauts who will take part of this mission to avoid irreversible damage to their health, which in turn means that future missions to Mars haven't been completely ruled out yet. The author of the study, Dr. Keith Sue, mentioned that they already knew about the issues that astronauts had after short space missions, like kidney stones for example, but they still don't know why such problems occur or what is going to happen to astronauts on much longer space flights, such as the planned mission to Mars. If they don't manage to develop new methods to protect the kidneys, astronauts who will eventually reach the red planet might need serious kidney treatment already on their way back. Unfortunately, the effects of radiation damage on kidneys appear pretty late. By the time they become apparent, it might be too late to prevent a kidney failure. This can be catastrophic, not only for the astronauts, but also for the entire mission's chances of success. Meanwhile, an astronaut on Mars is likely to receive up to 700 more daily radiation doses than those we get on our home planet. The Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere protect people from the non-stop bombardment of cosmic rays. These energetic particles travel close to the speed of light and can easily penetrate the human body. In space, astronauts aren't protected against this radiation as effectively as on Earth, which can increase the risk of many serious health issues during long missions. Damage to the human body can extend to the brain, heart, eyes, and central nervous system. Physicists studying cosmic radiation explain that one day in space is equivalent to the amount of radiation one receives on Earth for a whole year. Moreover, most of the changes in the genes of the astronauts are likely to be the result of radiation exposure. That's what a recent NASA's twin study claims. It has shown DNA damage in astronaut Scott Kelly compared to his identical twin and fellow astronaut Mark Kelly, who remained on our planet. Another source of space radiation are the unpredictable solar particle events. They deliver high doses of radiation in short periods of time, which can lead to radiation sickness if astronauts don't take special protective measures. Even space flights orbiting close to the Earth, including the International Space Station, have highly adverse health effects. These days, research communities are focused on musculoskeletal, neurological, ocular, and cardiovascular degeneration, and these issues can appear as soon as a few weeks into a mission. At the same time, the effects of low Earth orbit flights are less clear when we talk about other organs. More research is definitely needed.
How many people do we need to create a new civilization? And not on Earth, but on Mars, and in limited conditions. And if we create this colony and send them off, what problems will they face? How can they survive that far away from home without any support? A recent scientific study sheds light on these questions, so let's take a look at it. Alright, so you want to colonize Mars, right? Well, it's not an easy task. Mars is the fourth most distant planet from the Sun and the seventh largest in the solar system. This lonely red guy is very similar to our Earth. Moreover, before it became a boundless desert, it could well have even looked like Earth now. Millions of years ago, there was water, oceans, plants, and who knows, maybe even life. It would be nice to put all these cool things back there. No wonder we've been talking about colonization of this planet for a very long time. Now, SpaceX claims that their proposed interplanetary spacecraft could deliver 100 people to Mars. The owner of the company, billionaire Elon Musk, talked about creating a fleet that could provide a constant flow of resources to Mars. But how realistic are all these fantasies? Actually, not very much. Before sending people to Mars, we need to solve a number of issues. For example, the incredible radiation exposure, toxic soil, low gravity, low temperatures, and all sorts of other nasty things. And this is just the beginning. It will take at least a couple of decades to create a vehicle that can actually successfully land on Mars and return back. But let's do a thought experiment and imagine that we finally decided to colonize Mars. How will things turn out? Recently, scientists published a new study on this topic. This study is called Minimum Number of Settlers for Survival on Another Planet. The author is Jean-Marc Salotti, professor at the National Polytechnic Institute of Bordeaux in France. His article was published in the Scientific Reports journal. As you might have guessed, the study was trying to find out how we could colonize another planet. How many resources do we need? How should this colony live? What kind of work should they do? And how long will it take? And, of course, exactly how many people do we need for all of this? Let's try to answer that. Now, imagine that we've moved into a wonderful future. Well, not really. A terrible future, actually. In his study, Salotti suggested that life on Earth was threatened by some catastrophic event, so the only way for humanity to survive is to go to Mars or some other planet. In this imaginary scenario, unfortunately, the supply delivery from Earth was interrupted, or even gone. Now, the colony has to support itself somehow. Well, here's where we already stumble upon a bunch of problems. For example, we're not sure how well the people in the colony will work together. Will they communicate with each other like normal human beings? Will they share their time and resources as they should? Humans are constantly ruining things for other humans. I can even bet that it was their fault we had to flee to Mars. But even if we forget about that, how about organizational issues? What equipment do we have? What will we use to extract resources? What skills would we need? You know what? Who cares? In our case, these things don't matter. All that we know is that the colony doesn't have a lot of initial resources and equipment, and the human factor is absolutely unpredictable. So the chances of survival are pretty low, but we need to survive somehow. In this case, Sulati describes two things that will have a huge impact on our survival. These things are essentially variables in a mathematical equation. The first one is the availability of local resources. Basically, it means water, oxygen, and all sorts of useful chemical elements. These resources should be somehow mined and easy to use. Fortunately, we're not starting from scratch. We already know a lot about Mars. What resources are there? How can they be used for life support, agriculture, and industrial production? The colony is lucky because all this has been studied at various seminars and published in reports and books over the past years. Thanks to this, we know what will be available to our colony. For example, we know that gases could be extracted from the atmosphere and minerals from the soil. On Mars, we could provide such things as iron, glass, and even organic compounds. The most important problem here is the service life of the equipment that our new Martians start with. They'll have to get as many materials as possible before the tools break. Keeping them in good condition will be almost the most important task. The second thing is the production capacity, or the speed of work. We have a specific list of things we need to do, make some tools for example, and all this must be produced in sufficient quantities before the literal deadlines. Sulati says that the most important thing here will be the so-called sharing factor. Imagine one person trying to survive on Mars. They would have to do all the tasks on their own. They would need to find or build their own system for supplying drinking water, oxygen, and electricity generation. We've already seen how this played out in the movie The Martian. This task wasn't easy at all. There's always not enough time, and all of this is just too much for one person to handle. Unless you're Matt Damon, of course. So, surprisingly, we need a fairly large colony. This significantly distributes the burden. Each person spends less effort, gets tired less, and as a result, the efficiency and speed of work grow. This is where the sharing factor comes into play. Now we need to calculate this number. If we want, for example, to build something, how many people do we need to do this quickly and efficiently? How can we optimize the work as much as possible? Well, it depends on the needs of these people, on available resources, random things like weather, and so on. But in general, this number can be estimated and calculated using some mathematical functions. Sulati tells in more detail about these functions in his article. You can read it yourself if you're interested, but in general, he describes 5 areas that need to be taken into account when calculating this number. These areas are ecosystem management, energy production, industry, buildings, and the human factor. The human factor includes such things as the upbringing and education of children, sports, games, music, and so on. In the end, it all comes down to 2 things: how much time we have and how well the people in the colony will work with each other. So, what was the result of all these calculations? In the end, Sulati found out that we would need at least 110 people to successfully survive on Mars. This is the minimal number needed to create a self-sufficient civilization. And it will be better if we don't take too many people with us. The more people we take on the spacecraft, the more difficult it will be to predict the results. After all, as we've already said, humans are always ruining things for other humans. So it's better to stick with about 110 people. Of course, this is a rough estimate, and there are a bunch of different assumptions and uncertainties, but even this number is already very useful. Now the scientists know how many people is a minimum for colonization of another planet. Colonizing other planets is a very complex issue, and it will take us a very long time to resolve it. It's very unlikely that we'll fly to Mars in the near future. This task may take several decades, or even a century. Therefore, the best solution would be to try our best to save Earth until we can begin to conquer other planets. It seems to feel at home on any planet, we need the 4 crucial elements: air, water, earth, and fire. I'm gonna tell you what you need to squeeze to get a glass of water on Mars, how to grow your salad there, charge your phone without getting an astronomical electricity bill, and even generate some fresh air. What if I tell you there's an ocean on Mars? Right, you won't believe me, but there used to be an ocean. Scientists believe that nearly 1/3 of the planet was covered with an ocean called Oceanus Borealis. Once upon a time, about 3.8 to 4.1 billion years ago, the climate on Mars was warmer and the atmosphere was denser. But over time, the climatic conditions changed dramatically, and this once endless ocean simply evaporated into the atmosphere. According to estimates, only about 1% of all water evaporated, while 99% is still locked on the red planet. So, there are 2 sources of water now: the ice polar caps and the rocks. Ice polar caps are pretty simple to understand, as we have the very same thing on Earth, but rocks containing water. I mean, my juicer won't handle stones inside it, but let's delve into these stones just a little bit. For starters, there are at least 4 types of hydrous minerals on Mars. There are hydrous clays made of silicon oxygen, and the cool thing about them is that they can even contain magnesium and iron, which will come in handy once we start dwelling on Mars. Next is hydrous sulfates, which are sulfur-based. Don't ew, I know you thought of the rotten egg smell, but it's typical of hydrogen sulfide and not just sulfur. These minerals have water incorporated right into their chemical formulas. Next comes hydrous silica, which also has water locked in its formula. Carbonate salts found on Mars may not contain actual H2O, but they can only form if there's water nearby, so they just prove there used to be an ocean. But if the scientists don't come up with an idea on how to extract water from those rocks, there's a backup plan. In 2020, researchers discovered liquid water sources which may be a part of a huge network of underground saltwater lakes. So I guess we'll find a way to stay hydrated on Mars. We can either look for those water sources better, or just invent some technologically advanced juicer to squeeze water out of those stones. The red planet may seem to us as a lifeless desert where nothing can grow. But today it's a misconception, as there's been a couple of recent updates concerning the agricultural potential of Mars. In 2022, a group of scientists made something unbelievable. They managed to grow an Earth plant on Mars. Disclaimer: it's not that they plowed Mars, watered it, added fertilizers, and patiently waited for the first sprouts to show up. They experimented on Earth, but the conditions they created were purely Martian. You see, a plant needs soil, water, food, and sunlight to grow. Food and sunlight can be created artificially, so the scientists focused on the soil and water in their experiments. There's not much Mars can offer in terms of soil, but it's rich in basalt. Plants don't fancy residing in basalt, as it doesn't have many nutrients. But still, some of them aren't that picky when it comes to soil. As we already know, water on Mars is problematic too, but it can be found in limited amounts. Still, it can't be used for agricultural needs due to its chemical composition. Long story short, it's just way too salty for any plant out there to like it. But to keep the experiment true to life, the scientists started to look for possible ways of desalinating water. Thus, they added the bacteria known as Synechococcus, and even though the saline levels decreased dramatically, it was still not enough to satisfy the finicky plants. Luckily, the scientists had Plan B, and it worked out. They took the bacteria desalinated water and filtered it through basalt. In the end, they noticed that the resulting water was suitable for the plants. But that's just a theory. Let's see what we can actually grow on Mars. The scientists experimented with turnips, lettuce, radishes, and alfalfa. At first, turnips, lettuce, and radishes refused to flourish in basalt and feed on that filtered water. But then alfalfa came into play and it left the scientists stunned. The plant did really well in Martian conditions. This might seem to be the logical end of the experiment, and after all, alfalfa is pretty cool. It's rich in vitamin K, it has vitamin C, some vitamins B, zinc, and phosphorus. And you can Google a bunch of nice salads with alfalfa sprouts. But it has yet another property that may be a total game changer. Because of its deep roots, alfalfa can help fix soil nitrogen fertility. So once the scientists harvested the first Martian alfalfa, they immediately planted turnips, lettuce, and radishes back. This time, the crops did way better, and the scientists even noticed something they didn't expect. Turnip yields increased by 311%. I guess alfalfa has all the chances to become the star of Mars terraforming. Whoops, here comes the bad news. Even though you can theoretically stay hydrated on Mars and enjoy a fresh salad, at the moment, there's almost no way you can enjoy some fresh air on the red planet. Hey, you've noticed I said almost? Even though Mars's atmosphere is 96% carbon dioxide, we already know how to make small amounts of oxygen there. Meet the Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment, but you can call it MOXIE. It's a little helper that works together with Mars rovers. This little guy can isolate oxygen on Mars, and it already managed to produce 5 grams of it. It may sound like nothing, but 5 grams of oxygen equals 10 minutes of breathing. For now, MOXIE is for scientific use only, but it can actually help facilitate missions on Mars. Thing is, it's easier to produce oxygen directly on the spot than transport it from Earth to Mars. At the moment, MOXIE is not powerful enough. But once the scientists invent its descender, the air situation on Mars will change. For the fire to burn, we need one essential thing, which is oxygen. And we don't want to waste the results of MOXIE's hard work, especially if there can be alternatives. Historically, people would use fire to cook, get warm, and probably scare away some uninvited guests like saber-toothed tigers. Today, we can use electricity to cook and get warm, and no saber-toothed tiger has ever been spotted roaming the red planet. So let's see how people can generate electricity on Mars. There are quite a few options. Solar, geothermal, and wind energy can be used on Mars almost the same way we use them on Earth. Solar energy is promising, but it still won't be as effective as on Earth. Sunlight on Mars is only 43% as strong as it is in Earth's orbit, so producing electricity this way will take more effort. Don't forget about dust storms that aren't rare on Mars. During them, the sunlight gets sorta blocked. So should we ever rely on solar energy on Mars, we must be ready for occasional electrical outages. The next problem is seasonal variations. So we could benefit from solar power for only some months of the Martian year. And, of course, no solar energy at night. Anyways, this option might work out, but it should be combined with some alternative. For instance, wind power. Wind turbines won't have any problems working during the dust storm. And they also work at night. Seems like these two sources are a perfect combo. But geothermal energy could be a cool backup plan though. It can even work on Mars better than on Earth for a few reasons. First, the atmospheric pressure is lower on Mars, so more volumes of steam can be generated to drive the turbine. Second, Mars's surface temperature is lower, and it can help too, as it will increase the efficiency due to thermodynamic laws. Third, no water needed. We could use liquid carbon dioxide instead, and it would work perfectly. And unlike water, liquid carbon dioxide is free.
You and your camera have been literally everywhere on Earth. On top of Mount Everest and at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. You've seen the Nile River, Niagara Falls, the Sahara Desert, the Grand Canyon, and a million other beautiful places. On every trip, you brought back breathtaking pictures. Your album is already as thick as an encyclopedia, and it's time to discover a whole new world of tourism. Let's head on a voyage to Mars. You're sitting in a shiny modern rocket, counting down for takeoff. It might seem like a big deal, but with modern technology, it's practically a ride on a bus. In only a couple of hours, you're on the surface. It's time to head to the first destination for any tourist on Mars, Olympus Mons. It's the size of the entire state of Arizona and is 16 miles high. That's 3 times the size of Mount Everest. And it's the highest mountain in our entire solar system. It's actually even more than a mountain. It's a giant volcano. This entire mountain was formed when streams of lava rose to the surface, flowed down the volcano's slopes, and slowly cooled. The freshest soil layers are about 2 million years old. So scientists don't rule out the possibility that this volcano will wake up one day. Hopefully, you're not close by when it erupts. And there are statues of Greek deities everywhere. There's Apollo, and there are Athena and Artemis, and here's Zeus and Neptune. In the myths, these deities lived on Mount Olympus in Greece. These aren't natural, of course. We built these monuments to attract more tourists. There are even plenty of souvenir stalls where you can buy a lightning t-shirt in honor of Zeus. You take your first picture on Mars and move on to the next exciting place. This is a complex of 12 giant volcanoes. Some of them reach almost the height of Olympus. It's like if you piled 60 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. They're so tall because gravity is much weaker on Mars than on Earth. There isn't as much force pushing down on them, so they can grow much bigger than anything you could find on Earth. You feel lighter than you've ever felt before, and you can lift objects 3 times as heavy as you could back home. It's easy to see why the volcanoes are so big when you jump and fly 9 feet into the air. These volcanoes have been erupting for almost 2 billion years. That's almost half the age of our home planet. That's another reason they've gotten so tall. Click! The photo is ready, and you get on the rover to explore the next landmark, Vallis Marineris. This is the largest canyon in the world. It's longer than the distance from New York to Miami, and it's 4 times bigger than the Grand Canyon here on Earth. We don't know exactly how it came to be, but the most popular theory suggests that it was all because of the lava, which pushed the crust upward as it moved underground. Over time, these valleys grew into the enormous canyon of Vallis Marineris. The next stop is Cydonia. The cool thing about this place is the giant rock with a human face. In 1976, we saw photos from the surface of Mars and could clearly recognize a human head here. People immediately came up with 1,000 theories as to how it could have appeared here. The fun theorizing and speculation came to an end, though, when new photos were taken in 2011. These clearer pictures showed that the eyes, nose, and mouth were just shadows that couldn't be picked out in the original low-quality image. In fact, it's just a hill, a lot less exciting up close. Wear a warm jacket to view the next landmark spot. This is the North Pole. Make sure you keep a tight hold of your camera too. It's pretty windy out here. That ice that you see is carbon dioxide, which looks like that because of the extremely low temperatures. It can get cold here at negative 226 degrees Fahrenheit. This cold place and the North Pole are responsible for the strong winds all over the planet. And there are even geysers at the South Pole. In spring, when it gets warmer, jets of carbon dioxide rush to the surface, taking dust and sand with them. Quick, get it on your camera! Various studies say that there is an underground lake as wide as Delaware Bay, 1 mile beneath a thick layer of ice. Moving on to Gail Crater. This is where the Curiosity rover landed in 2012. Oh, and here's its replica. This little guy has been studying the surface of Mars for years and has found signs of evaporated water. This means that Mars could have fostered life in the past. The rover also found a lot of evidence of organic molecules, as well as methane gas. It could come from microbes and other living things, but we don't know enough yet to say for sure. The existence of life on Mars hasn't been confirmed, but it's exciting to think that there could have been real Martians alive at some point. You take a selfie, like you're holding Curiosity on your arm. Great, the Mars cab is already here for you, and you're heading toward Medusae Fossae. Many people believe that this could be an alien crash site because of the strange appearance of these rocks. Of course, that's not true. Scientists suggest that volcanoes have been erupting here for years. Lava has cooled into rocks, and strong winds have given them strange shapes. This entire volcanic deposit covers an area the size of a fifth of the United States. And here's a place that has made Earth scientists nervous and even scared. Hale Crater and these lines on the slopes. Studies have shown that this place was moistening, meaning that water could flow there. But then it was determined that it was dry sand streams. Scientists fear this place may be home to alien microbes, so you probably shouldn't get too close. Another mysterious place for tourists on Mars is ghost dunes. In the ancient times of this planet, there were dunes dozens of feet high, but then they were flooded by water or lava. Their bases are preserved, but the tops have been erased. The covered areas of these dunes can still harbor microbes. Here, they are protected from wind and solar radiation and may still be preserved. Contact with them can be dangerous for humans, so you take a photo from afar. The next spot is on Mars's satellite, Phobos. Oh, there's a pretty big crowd of people gathered here. And then you see it, Phobos monolith. It's a massive rock as tall as a 30-story building. We learned about this object from pictures taken back on Earth. The monolith casts a great shadow and has spawned many theories. For example, some claim that it was built by an ancient civilization or was left here by aliens. It might even have been a beacon. All these people came here to test the theory for themselves, but it just looks like a rock up close. One more photo, and you have to hurry to the bus that will take you to Jupiter's satellite, Io. It's only safe to be here in special capsule cars that fly over the surface. And when you see volcanoes constantly erupting, you understand why. Jupiter's gravity compresses the insides of Io. They heat up and rise to the surface, erupting in volcanoes on its surface. They eject so much material that Io completely changes its surface every few millennia. Now we turn on the hyperdrives and head out into deep space. Here, in complete darkness, is the Voyager probe. It was launched in 1977 and is still in operation. It's the first human-made object to leave our solar system's borders and is the world's most distant spacecraft. Voyager carries a golden disk with a message for extraterrestrial civilizations. This amazing disk contains pictures of Earth's landscapes, people, animals, and various sounds and music. Unfortunately, it will take many thousands of years to reach the nearest star system, so we're not very likely to hear back from any aliens anytime soon. You take selfies and move on to the next part of the tour. Here, 1,000 light years from Earth, is a black hole, the most mysterious and heaviest object in the universe. It weighs as much as the sun, but it's much smaller. It's so heavy that it attracts absolutely everything, even light. So the black hole isn't actually black. It has no color at all. You can only observe it from a very great distance because it bends time. The closer you are to it, the slower time will go. And if you want to fly just a second closer to it, weeks or even months might pass on Earth in that time. In the old tradition, you toss a coin into the black hole and continue your journey through the distant cosmos. On the way home, you have to stop by an iconic spot on the moon. Here in the Sea of Tranquility, there's an entire park near the landing site of Apollo 11. This is where the first human set foot on the surface of the moon. Neil Armstrong's first boot print is still there on the surface as proof. It was made in 1969, but even now, it looks exactly the same.
Mars has long been a source of mystery and fascination, with numerous anomalies discovered on its surface that challenge conventional explanations. Among the most intriguing is a square-shaped formation captured by the Mars Global Surveyor's orbiter camera. This unusual structure, visible in an image available through Arizona State University's Mars Image Explorer, has sparked intense debate among researchers and enthusiasts alike. Many believe that this geometric formation, along with other peculiar structures on Mars, warrants further investigation as it could potentially reveal artificial or unknown processes shaping the Martian landscape. The discovery of this square-shaped formation has raised profound questions about its origin. Unlike the chaotic natural formations typically seen on Mars, this structure exhibits a level of symmetry and geometric precision rarely found in nature. Most natural geological processes, such as erosion and volcanic activity, tend to create irregular, unpredictable formations. However, the almost perfect angles and well-defined edges of this Martian square suggest that it may not be the product of ordinary geological forces. Some skeptics argue that its unique shape indicates an artificial or intelligently designed origin, pointing to the possibility that Mars may have once harbored an advanced civilization or been visited by extraterrestrial beings in the distant past. If this theory holds, the square formation could represent the remnants of an ancient structure, now partially buried under Martian dust and sediment. One of the most compelling aspects of this formation is its location and scale. The image from the Mars Global Surveyor provides detailed measurements suggesting that the square formation is significantly large, far beyond the scale of ordinary rock formations. Its distinct shape compared to the surrounding terrain makes it stand out as an anomaly, further adding to the mystery of its existence. If it were merely the result of natural geological processes, one would expect to see other similarly shaped formations nearby. Yet this is not the case. This discrepancy raises questions about whether Mars has undergone processes unknown to mainstream science, or if intelligent intervention played a role in shaping its surface. Supporters of the artificial structure hypothesis argue that the square formation could be a remnant of an ancient Martian civilization, similar to the ruins of ancient cities found on Earth. They suggest that if Mars once had conditions capable of supporting life, it is entirely plausible that an advanced society could have flourished there before some catastrophic event led to its demise. Given the evidence of past water activity and the possibility of an ancient atmosphere, this theory is not as far-fetched as it might seem. If Mars did indeed host intelligent life in the distant past, structures like the square formation could be key to understanding the history of the planet and the fate of its inhabitants. Another possibility is that the square formation may be linked to extraterrestrial visitors. Some researchers speculate that Mars may have been used as a base or an outpost by non-human intelligences at some point in history. The precision of the square shape and its distinct edges lend credibility to the idea that it may have been deliberately constructed rather than formed through random geological processes. If true, this would suggest that Mars has played a far more significant role in interstellar history than previously thought. NASA and other space agencies have largely remained silent on the implications of these formations, often dismissing them as natural rock formations or imaging artifacts. However, this stance has not deterred independent researchers and analysts from continuing to investigate. With the increasing availability of high-resolution images from Mars rovers and orbiters, more anomalies are being identified, adding to the growing body of evidence suggesting Mars may not be the barren, lifeless world it is often portrayed to be. The presence of geometric formations on Mars raises profound questions about our understanding of planetary science and history. If the square formation is indeed artificial, it could revolutionize our understanding of Mars and the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence. Despite skepticism from mainstream scientific circles, the demand for further study of these formations continues to grow. Many argue that future missions to Mars should prioritize the exploration of these anomalies using advanced technology to determine whether they are truly artificial in nature. With human missions to Mars on the horizon, the opportunity to investigate these structures up close may soon become a reality. If we are to uncover the true nature of Mars, we must be open to the possibility that what we find there could change everything we thought we knew about the universe. The square-shaped formation on Mars remains one of the most intriguing and unexplained discoveries in planetary exploration. Its geometric precision and distinct appearance challenge traditional explanations and fuel speculation about its possible artificial origins. Whether it is evidence of an ancient civilization, a remnant of extraterrestrial visitors, or a geological anomaly unlike any seen before, this formation demands further study. As humanity continues to explore the cosmos, we may one day uncover the truth about Mars and the mysterious structures that lie on its surface, revealing secrets that have been hidden for millennia.
Recently, scientists have made an astounding discovery that can change the entire course of Mars exploration. Apparently, there are oceans of liquid water on the red planet, so the future looks bright. We could use this water to support future missions, and then even relocate to Mars since we wouldn't need to worry about where to get this precious liquid, right? Well, there's one big problem. These oceans of liquid water are in Mars, so deep inside that we aren't likely to get there. At least that's what a new analysis of seismic data collected by the Mars Insight lander claims. Huge reserves of liquid water seem to be the best explanation for some seismic quirks of the red planet. So all this precious water is out of our reach. But we need to find it to solve the puzzle of the aquatic history of our blushing, dusty neighbor. And the first thing we need to do is identify where the water is and how much of it the planet is hiding.
Navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed and we are seeing significant deceleration.
Now, our rovers are scurrying about on the surface of the red planet, gathering all the available data on the planet's surface geology. And it's getting increasingly obvious that Mars was once covered with water. Many factors, from Martian terrains to ancient dry lake beds and deltas, suggest that there was a time when the planet was quite soppy. These days, there's still some water on and right below the surface of Mars, but it's in the form of ice and nowhere near what Mars had in the ancient past. To understand how much of it could have been on the red planet billions of years ago, we must know where all this water went. There are two spots where the water could have gone: into space or toward the interior of Mars. Then it could have been isolated as either liquid reservoirs or ice deposits. Currently, we don't have any way of measuring how much water once leaked away. But now, we finally can find out more about the gooey center of the red planet. All thanks to the Mars Insight lander. It isn't operating anymore, but from November 2018 to December 2022, it was listening to the hums and rumbles and monitoring the activity below its feet. The thing is, acoustic waves generated by seismic activity deep inside the planet can change according to the composition and density of the material these waves are moving through. And scientists can get a lot of information analyzing the behavior of seismic waves. In this case, they used a model similar to those used to map underground oil fields and aquifers on our home planet. Then, with the help of this model, they analyzed the data gathered by InSight on Mars. They discovered that the best explanation could be that there was a layer of fractured rocks whose cracks were filled with water deep under the surface of the red planet. That layer could be at a depth of 7 to 12 miles. That's why it would be extremely tricky for future missions to get to it. And still, the new discovery could help us understand the Martian water cycle. Confirming the existence of a large reservoir of liquid water can help us sneak a peek at what the climate on Mars used to be, or what it could be like one day. And if once Mars had a lot of water, it could have been habitable in the ancient past and might become habitable in the future. Water is crucial for life as we know it, so underground water reservoirs on the red planet could already be habitable. Maybe, while we're talking, tiny microorganisms or even some tentacled creatures are living their lives in the comfort of their underground home. On Earth, super deep mines do host life, and the bottom of the ocean, with its immense unbelievable pressures, isn't lifeless either. So far, we haven't found any evidence of life on Mars, but for now, it sounds like this place has the potential to sustain life. InSight data has shown that there isn't likely to be a lot of water ice in the upper crust of the planet, at least in the region around the lander. But if it turns out that there is a water-rich layer deep below the surface and stretching around the entire globe of the planet, then there would be enough water to fill ancient ocean beds and even more. Now, Mars isn't the only place outside Earth where there is water or where we might one day find water. Take the good old Moon, for example. On Earth's natural satellite, water can be found all over the surface, but it's not the water you might be imagining. On the Moon, water remains mostly as ice, and it's distributed unevenly. For example, the poles of the Moon are the regions that never receive sunlight. This is the reason they're extremely cold, and it's no wonder there's a lot of ice there. The ice in these areas is often mixed with the lunar soil and hiding deep below the surface. Then there's Enceladus, the sixth largest moon of Saturn. In reality, it's not that large, just 314 miles across. In other words, this moon is small enough to fit inside Arizona. Ooh, we should try that. Well, interestingly, when the Cassini space probe first arrived at Saturn, researchers were expecting Enceladus to be a frozen ball of ice. But what they saw was plumes of icy particles and water vapor erupting from geysers on the moon's surface. It was clear that there was a massive ocean between the moon's rocky core and its icy shell. Then there's Jupiter's moon Europa. Scientists think that this world is one of the most promising places in the solar system when it comes to searching for new life forms. That's because Europa has a huge saltwater ocean as deep as 40 to 100 miles. And even though it's under a layer of ice that is likely to be 10 to 20 miles thick, it's still potentially habitable. Astronomers believe that plumes of water might erupt from cracks in the ice shell and release the contents of the moon's ocean into space. The temperature, pressure, and chemistry are very different on Europa, and astronomers aren't sure yet how the ice behaves there. That's the main reason they haven't figured out yet how deep or large the water reservoirs on Europa are and how long they need to refreeze. But out of all the places where we could find water in the universe, the most bizarre is probably open space. In 2011, two teams of astronomers discovered a cloud of water floating freely among stars. It was the largest and farthest reservoir of water ever detected. So this massive cloud of water vapor surrounds a black hole, but not just any black hole. This one's a quasar, located 12 billion light-years from Earth. The conditions around this quasar must be really special to create such an enormous amount of water. This cloud contains 140 trillion times the volume of all the water on Earth. That's enough to give every person on the planet a whole planet's worth of water 20,000 times over. Sounds wild, doesn't it? But there's something even cooler. Astronomers think this water cloud formed just 1.6 billion years after the universe began. This discovery is yet another sign that water has been around all over the universe, even in its early days. But here's the kicker. Until they found this, scientists had never detected water vapor so far back in time. Sure, there's water in our Milky Way galaxy, but most of it's frozen solid in ice. This discovery really pushes the boundaries of what we know about water in the universe. If alien life exists, it may be way stranger than we can imagine. For some inexplicable reason, we've long assumed that aliens might be like us humans. But in reality, they're more likely to be some form of unfathomable AI. With dozens of billions of years of evolution, intelligence can develop in entirely new, unexpected directions. Humans might be near the end of Darwinian evolution. We no longer need to remain the fittest to survive. But the technological evolution of AI minds is just starting. Who knows, maybe in another century or two, we'll be overtaken by inorganic intelligence. So, the question is, are aliens more likely to be flesh and blood, like us, or are they something more artificial? Even though many believe that people are at the peak of intelligence, it's possible that our species may just represent a stage on the way toward more artificial and advanced minds. And it can actually explain why space seems to be empty of similar forms of life. Perhaps an evolutionary transition to non-organic intelligence is inevitable all over the universe. Then aliens could be electronic descendants of once organic creatures that existed long, long ago. Such an idea gives us some exciting possibilities. If AI aliens were out there, they would act and think totally differently from us. Plus, they might not want to be detected. Non-organic intelligence may not need an atmosphere, so they might have already left their home planet. If they didn't need any special conditions, they would be able to make intergalactic voyages without having to fear for their lives. They could prefer to live in zero gravity because, in such conditions, you can build very large and very lightweight structures. For example, if you wanted to construct a giant gossamer-thin structure to harvest energy, it would be easier to do so in space than on a planet. They might not even need to live in orbit around a star. They could have innovative ways of getting energy we can't imagine yet. If their brains were silicon-based, they could realize that they needed less energy to process information at lower temperatures. So, they would move away from planetary systems to colder regions of the cosmos. They could even have periods of hibernation for billions of years. What if they had such a period waiting until the cosmic microwave background, the leftover radiation after the Big Bang, cooled down enough for them to function properly? We can't assume that these aliens would be a civilization either. On Earth, this term means a society of individuals. But aliens might be a single integrated intelligence, or they might be zombies, super intelligent but lacking self-awareness and inner life. In this case, they would be alive but unable to perceive themselves or the world around them. Alternatively, their advanced intelligence might allow them to understand aspects of reality we can't figure out yet. There are likely to be things in the universe that neither our mind nor our senses can grasp. But electronic brains might have a very different perception. Interestingly, these days, humans themselves are starting to use AI to detect alien life out there. After all, there are between 10 and 50 billion potentially habitable worlds in our galaxy alone, and looking for intelligent life is a hard task without some assistance. That's when the US-based research organization, SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, comes into play. This institute is looking for science and technology beyond the solar system. It could be evidence of intelligence out there. But it's a needle in a haystack kind of situation. Luckily, new instruments are helping the search. Artificial intelligence can both handle massive datasets and spot anomalies, which is transforming the hunt for alien intelligence. SETI, together with other research organizations, built an AI-powered software system called the Very Large Array. It consists of 28 large dish antennas spread across a desert plain. When it starts working, the AI will be able to process 2 terabytes of data every second. For comparison, modern laptops typically have around 1 terabyte of total storage. So, hopefully, these new tools will provide us with new, groundbreaking discoveries. NASA made this cool rover called Curiosity and sent it to Mars to see what else we can find out about the red planet, the one that will possibly become our next home. Curiosity has been exploring the surface of Mars, taking measurements and gathering data about the planet for more than 10 years. And good old Curiosity stumbled upon some interesting wave-rippled rocks in the region of the Martian surface that was kind of expected to be drier. Scientists believe this area was actually a lake bed. It might be the bottom of a dried-up lake and all that sediment and other things that have accumulated there. All this can give us some important clues about the history of the lake. For instance, the types of organisms that might have lived there, how deep the lake was, how long it was there, and similar stuff. These wave-rippled patterns tell us that these rocks may have formed when strong Martian winds were moving the water in this big ancient lake. You know that specific sound you can hear when you're holding a seashell to your ear? You actually hear it because of the way the air gets trapped inside the shell and moves against its walls. The air cannot escape, so it vibrates at frequencies that depend on the size of the shell. In other words, you have a feeling you hear the sound of waves hitting a shore. That's Mars in my imagination now, a spot where you can still hear the long-lost sound of waves crashing against the shores of mysterious gigantic lakes. During its mission, Curiosity also came across a metallic object which turned out to be a meteorite. This unusual rock that came from space is made of nickel and iron. Its name is Cacao, and it's about the size of a small car, 6.5 feet long, and weighs over a ton. This is an important discovery because we don't often find metallic objects on the Martian surface. Most of the rocks there are made of basalt or some other volcanic materials, so that chunk of metal could tell us more about the history of Mars and how it formed. Plus, it definitely stands out. The surface of Mars is red from oxides, while Cacao is metallic-looking and dark gray. It's rounded and smooth, too, which means it once passed through Mars's atmosphere. There have been other robots exploring Mars, too. For instance, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MRO, stumbled upon circular sand dunes. Sand dunes are usually very common on the red planet. They come in many different shapes and sizes, but circular ones like these are really rare. They consist of dark sand with light-colored material surrounding them. And the cool thing is that these dunes are arranged in a specific pattern, similar to the spokes of a wheel. It could be because of the way the winds blow. But back to our buddy, Curiosity. It's been exploring many other interesting things, like oxygen levels in the Martian atmosphere. The levels change depending on the season. There's more oxygen in the spring and summer. It's still not clear why, though, and of course, even that is not enough for us to really breathe there. The concentration of oxygen on Mars is 0.1%, which is about 100 times less than the concentration in Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere of Mars is mostly made up of carbon dioxide, with traces of other gases. Curiosity was so good that it also decided to analyze the age of rocks it found. It seems they're much older than we previously thought. Some of them date back more than 3 billion years. Curiosity found organic molecules in soil samples too. These molecules are basically building blocks of life. Now, this doesn't prove there's indeed life on Mars. It's just one of the things that suggests there might have been some form of life a long time ago. Curiosity discovered potential evidence that there might be a large reservoir of liquid water beneath the south polar ice cap, probably very salty and full of different minerals. This high salinity is the reason why this water could remain liquid at temperatures well below freezing. It would be cool to have some sort of subsurface ocean to take a dip in, especially when these crazy Martian winds are raging on the surface. And it would be great to have something that would protect us from those insane radiation levels on the red planet. There are some pretty toxic chemicals and salts in the Martian soil, which can be really bad for humans. Astronauts could potentially end up being exposed to these toxic chemicals, either through direct contact with the soil or by inhaling dust that contains these salts. Also, these substances could be a problem for growing crops. This is a really big discovery for long-term missions to Mars, because astronauts would need to be able to grow their own food so they can survive while there. Another thing that favors the idea of potential life on Mars is discovering methane there. Methane is a very important finding because usually living organisms produce this gas. So, where did it come from if not from them? In reality, there are a few possible explanations for that. One is the geological activity of underground reservoirs. Another idea is that meteorites brought methane to the red planet. What's interesting is that levels of methane are higher in particular areas. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I'll stick to the theory that it comes from living organisms. Now, it's possible that volcanoes on Mars are still active. We know there are many extinct volcanoes on the red planet, but we've never found enough evidence to prove that some of them are still alive. Scientists studied volcanic deposits and found out that some volcanoes could have erupted maybe 50,000 years ago. Before that, everyone thought the last eruption happened 3 to 4 billion years ago. If you could compress the geological history of Mars into just one day, this would be like having an eruption a second ago. So, you never know. There might still be magma bubbling in secret under the Martian surface. All the future generations that might end up building their life there could really have some fun. Mars turned into a cold and barren place that can't really support life over time. And one of the main reasons for that was losing its atmosphere. The red planet used to have a much thicker atmosphere, similar to Earth's. One major reason for that is its relatively weak magnetic field. Earth's magnetic field helps protect our atmosphere from the solar wind, a stream of charged particles that comes from the sun. Without this protection, Mars had nothing to help it confront this insanely strong force that eventually took away most of its atmosphere. Another factor that played a big role in the loss of Mars's atmosphere is its relatively low gravity. Because Mars has weaker gravity than Earth, it's easier for gas molecules to escape into space. So Mars probably used to be more similar to our home planet. But with its current thin atmosphere, it can't keep any heat, which makes it very cold and very complicated for us to explore. But maybe it's better for us that we didn't visit the red planet back in its old times. There's this story about an ancient mega-flood that might have happened there. So yes, the red planet probably used to be a wetter and more hospitable place than it is today, with beautiful flowing rivers and amazing lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water. And some research showed evidence of large channels carved into the planet's surface. These channels are way bigger than any we previously found on the planet. They suggest this mega-flood happened billions of years ago. Perhaps it happened as a result of different factors, like volcanic activity, melting ice, and the release of carbon dioxide from the planet's crust. The flood may have created some temporary pools of water, too. Hopefully, it will mean more interesting clues for finding traces of microbial life. How about that? So imagine being one of the first people sent to explore Mars. As you're approaching the red planet, something strange and creepy draws your attention. There, yes, right there. Doesn't it look like a mammoth bear's head? What or who could possibly create a bear's snout in the middle of a crater? Unfortunately, or should I say luckily, there's nothing mysterious about the bear's head. It's just a facial pareidolia. That's a tendency to see facial features in everyday things. But speaking about the finding on Mars, should we rename the phenomenon into Pareidolia? You could see that coming, couldn't you? Alright, check it out. You see a V-shaped hill that looks like a nose. Then there are two craters that look like eyes. And then there's a circular fracture pattern, the head, that surrounds the nose and the eyes. Experts think that the face could be created when a deposit was settling over a buried impact crater, and the nose might be a mud or volcanic vent with solidified lava or mud flows around it. Anyway, the crater does look like a bear's face, I'll give you that. But thanks to HiRISE, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's high-resolution imaging science experiment camera, another of NASA's amazing acronyms, we've seen many other crazy craters on the red planet, like smiley faces, a bird, or an elephant. First, let's have a look at the famous face of Mars. These images were first taken by the Viking orbiter in 1976. At that time, the resolution was obviously quite poor, plus the lighting was slanted, which produced the result that shocked people in the 1970s, a face carved of rock staring back at Earth. Did it mean there was another civilization on Mars that had created this monument? Nah. Look at the photo of the same spot taken by the current Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. The resolution is much, much better, and the face has miraculously turned into an ordinary hill. Or look at this teeny Bigfoot, whose image was captured in 2008. I say teeny because this creature is just a few inches tall, and when the photo was taken, Bigfoot was only several yards away from the camera. And here, one curious soul zoomed in on a small rock and spotted something that resembled a gorilla. That's how some people started to believe there were apes on Mars. Yeah, really. Let me show you some more examples of imaginary creatures and faces on the red planet. Most of them come from a series of images taken by the Themis camera. Currently, it's on board the Mars Odyssey spacecraft, which only needs 2 hours to orbit the red planet, carrying some important scientific instruments. Let me introduce my happy Martian to you. This 2-mile-wide crater was photographed in 2008. The next crater chain looks like a wasp with its wispy wings of impact debris. The whole feature was probably created by a meteorite that fell at a very low angle and broke into pieces right before the impact. Now, do you see a woolly mammoth or an elephant here? Lava flows in one region on Mars left this image on its reddish soil. The region itself, called Elysium Planitia, is famous for the planet's youngest lava flows. For example, the one that looks like a mammoth most likely formed in the past 100 million years. Just yesterday. Now let's talk about love, or rather its symbol, the heart. Do you like these two hearts on the surface of the red planet? This one is actually a mesa top outlined by frost, and this heart shape is an impact crater. The hit tore away dark surface material and exposed lighter soil underneath. Then some of the material probably flew downslope, creating the heart. And this dust-covered hummingbird, can you see its long beak and head? Scientists aren't sure how this shape was formed, but they think erosion and wind played a part in its creation. These dark sand dune deposits look like a howling wolf. And here, can you see a series of interlocking gears? This image looks like the letter T, right? The right angle fracture was created by the tectonic stretching of the Martian crust. Do you think we might find other letters of the alphabet on Mars too? Why not? And now, how about another bizarre thing astronomers noticed on the surface of Mars? Is that a door to someone's house? It was NASA's Curiosity rover that sent this image to Earth. It became viral because this formation over here, see, looks like a door. Unfortunately, scientists, due to their rational minds, were quick to disappoint us. They claimed that it was just a natural part of the Martian landscape. There were several clues that made them think it wasn't a real door. For example, the opening is tiny, a mere 3 feet high. They're sure that what looks like a door is actually an opening in a rock created by natural forces, like winds and erosion. If you look at the rock closely, you may notice strata. Those are layers of silt that stand out because they're harder than the surrounding material. These strata dip here on the left and a bit higher on the right. They likely appeared around 4 billion years ago in a river or a wind-blown dune. Since the strata became visible, powerful Martian winds have eroded them even more. And look at this. See those cracks? That's how rocks weather on the red planet. This small cave probably formed when several fractures crossed the strata. A pretty large boulder might have fallen out under its own weight, and this created the door-shaped opening. This theory is quite plausible, because even though the gravity on Mars isn't as strong as on Earth, it's still strong enough to do it. Besides, see that rock to the right of the opening? It has a suspiciously smooth vertical edge. It must be the culprit. It probably fell out not so long ago. But it's not only the red planet that can boast of having unusual formations. Let's take this comet, for example. This image was taken by the European spacecraft Rosetta in 2014. Can you see a face on its right-hand side? Or the moon. Here's its famous rabbit. It sits upside down with its ears pointing downward. Some people see a man on the moon. It can either be his face or the entire body. If someone sees the whole human figure, it usually looks like it's carrying sticks. Sometimes it's a toad. To spot it, look at the top left-hand side of our moon. The toad is facing upward, see? Now look at this spinning neutron star. Such a star is a collapsed core of a supergiant star with a total mass of 10 to 25 solar masses. Except for black holes and some hypothetical objects, like quark stars or white holes, neutron stars are the densest and smallest known stellar objects. Anyway, back to this particular star. As you can see, this space object, located 17,000 light-years away from Earth, is surrounded by a cloud of energetic particles. And this image, taken by NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory, appeared in 2009 and became viral in no time. All because many people spotted a hand-like structure among all that space stuff. NASA explained that the star was spinning incredibly fast, spewing energy into the space surrounding it. This created intriguing and complex structures, like the large cosmic hand so many people see. Now look at the Horsehead Nebula in the constellation Orion. This is a freezing cold and dark cloud of dust and gas that was first noted in 1888. This dark shadowing is created by dust, and at the base of the nebula there are many bright spots. Those are young stars at the stage of formation. Pay attention to this extremely bright star in the top left side of the Horsehead. Its radiation is so powerful that the star is starting to erode the cloud around itself. It means that in millions of years, the nebula might not resemble the head of a horse anymore. Well, I won't be around then. The European Southern Observatory Very Large Telescope has captured an image in which we can see the collision of 3 different galaxies. We can even observe the effect they have on each other. But the coolest thing is that while colliding, they created a recognizable shape. Because doesn't it look like a giant space hummingbird?